Now, Verstappen is one of the most talented drivers in F1 history, and he's currently a two-time world champion. The 2022 season was truly a dominating one for the Dutchman, but it wasn't always easy for him to climb his way from karting categories all the way to F3 and then join the F1 community. Still, the impact he made on the sport is a massive one. And did you know that the FIA implemented a rule called the Verstappen rule? With this rule, they're inhibiting drivers from competing in the sport until they're 18 years of age, due to the fact that Verstappen debuted at 17. So what was Verstappen's path, and what were some of the issues he had to overcome while climbing his own path of success? Max Verstappen was born to a Dutch father, Jos Verstappen, and a Belgian mother, Sophie Kumpen. We all know that his father was an F1 racer, competing for a variety of teams, but having nowhere near the same success as his son is having now. When Verstappen initially showed an increased interest in racing, which was at the age of 4, his father decided to retire from the sport and focus entirely on his son by investing all of his knowledge in him. On top of that, Verstappen and his father had a tough love relationship growing up, and that's something that Verstappen recalls with laughter now. Verstappen started in the Mini Junior Championship in 2006, quickly graduating to the Rotax Max Mini class and winning the Belgium Championship. Due to the fact that his father and mother were divorced, he spent lots of times with both of them separately and even had the chance to choose the flag he'd race under. In 2009, Verstappen joined Team Pex Racing, which was a CRG customer team, winning the Flemish Minimax Championship and the Belgium KF5 Championship that same year. Later on in his career, Verstappen chose to race under the Dutch flag because he felt more Dutch due to the amount of time he was spending with his father in racing. 2010 was the year when Verstappen stepped into the International Karting Series, being signed by CRG to race at the World and European Championships. At the KF3 World Cup, Verstappen finished second, just behind Alex Albon, who turned out to be his teammate later in Red Bull. Still, Verstappen was seeking revenge and managed to beat Albon at the WSK Euro Series in a Parilla-powered CRG. Verstappen's practices with his father were truly something extraordinary. His father made him drive the karts out there in the snow while he was waiting for him in the van. He was always leaving the van open so that after 15 minutes, Verstappen could come up and heat up his fingers because they were freezing. And after a couple of short minutes in the van, Verstappen was sent back out into the freezing cold weather to complete more laps on the track. Now, after winning practically everything there was to win in the karting categories, Verstappen managed to join the racing cars, and his first experience was at the Pembrey circuit on October 11th, 2013. Verstappen completed 160 laps in a Formula Renault car provided by the Dutch team MP Motorsport, the same team with which Drogovic recently won the F2 Championship. In 2014, Verstappen made his debut in the non-championship Florida Winter Series. On February the 5th, Verstappen won the race at Palm Beach International Raceway after he started from pole, and a few weeks later, Verstappen was able to win his second race, beating Nicholas Latifi by just 0.004 seconds. Who would have thought that they would be fighting so close back then? And 7 years later, Latifi would have a crucial role in Verstappen's championship in Abu Dhabi. Verstappen's first experience in an F1 car was in 2014 when he test drove for Toro Rosso, replacing Jean-Eric Vergne at the Suzuka GP. Now, this was part of the preparation for his full-time seat at Toro Rosso in the 2015 season. At just 17 years and 3 days, Verstappen set the record for being the youngest person in history to participate in a Formula 1 race weekend. The youngest ever records are something that Verstappen has a lot below his belt, and in August 2014, he joined the Red Bull Junior team after testing a Formula Renault 3.5 car. Quite interestingly, Verstappen did have an offer from Mercedes at this time, but he refused it. So, history was written in the 2015 season at the Australian GP when Verstappen became the youngest driver to ever start a World Championship race, lining up with Carlos Sainz as his teammate. At this time, Verstappen was 17 years and 166 days old, breaking Jaime Alguersuari's existing record by almost 2 years. Verstappen's first race ended with engine failure, as he was close to scoring his first career points on his first outing. Almost immediately, Verstappen's biggest flaw resurfaced, which was his temper. He wasn't able to control his feelings. He constantly threw tantrums on the radio, and that was done at his debut with Toro Rosso when he kept swearing on the radio as to why wasn't Sainz letting him go because he was the faster teammate. Still, Verstappen managed to score his points at the second race in Malaysia, as he qualified 6th and ended the race in 7th place, becoming the youngest driver ever to score World Championship points at just 17 years and 180 days. Verstappen's best finish of the 2015 season was in Hungary, where he finished 4th with Toro Rosso, and he managed to achieve the same result in the US GP later on in the season. At the end of the season, Verstappen was awarded the Rookie of the Season award, as well as the Personality of the Year and Action of the Year for overtaking Felipe Nasser on the outside of the Blanchimont corner at the Belgium GP. 2016 was the season that mattered the most in Verstappen's career, as he started the season in Toro Rosso, but just a couple of races into the season, at the Barcelona GP, he took Dani Kvyat's place in Red Bull, as the Russian driver was placed yet again in Toro Rosso. At this time, Horner spoke about Verstappen's talent, saying, "Max has proven to be an outstanding young talent. His performance at Toro Rosso has been impressive so far, and we're pleased to give him the opportunity to drive for Red Bull Racing." Verstappen qualified 4th at the Barcelona GP, but managed to pass his teammate on lap 1 and be 3rd at one point. This was the infamous race for Mercedes when Rosberg and Hamilton crashed while the Briton was trying to complete an overtake on the German. This allowed Verstappen to take the lead, as he didn't let it go until the end of the race and finished ahead of Raikkonen. This turned out to be the best debut for Red Bull, as he won a race on his first try. Verstappen did have a challenge, and the challenge was to prove that he's much better than Ricciardo. That was hard in the first 2 years, but in 2018 he was able to beat Ricciardo, and this is when the Aussie decided to leave the team because he felt like they were investing too much in the Dutchman and too little in him. On top of that, Red Bull changed to Honda from 2019 onwards, and according to Ricciardo, he didn't have much trust in the Honda engines because McLaren were using them up to that point, and they proved to be one of the most unreliable engines on the grid. Now, Verstappen's first pole position came in Hungary, 3 years after he debuted for Red Bull in 2019. Up to this point, Verstappen hasn't been very popular when it comes to taking pole positions, and we see that in 2022. He only has 5 pole positions but 12 wins. His talent comes in handy on Sunday, when points are most important, as we saw this season when Verstappen won races after starting P14, P10 and P7. Not many drivers on the grid can boast of such achievement, and it is this that truly distinguishes Verstappen from the competition. 2020 was the season when Verstappen finished 3rd in the championship behind Hamilton and Bottas, which was his best finish to this point. Still, the 2021 season is when Red Bull, more precisely Max Verstappen, emerge as the only challengers that are going to stand in the way of Hamilton's 8th record-breaking championship. Verstappen dominated a huge number of the races in the first half of the season, but the fight with Hamilton became personal after the Silverstone crash that sent Verstappen into the wall with 51 G-force. Still, the season decider was in Abu Dhabi, and we all know how that race ended. Verstappen was able to capitalize on Latifi's crash and change tyres, hoping that he'd receive at least 1 lap of clean racing now that Hamilton was left outside with old tyres. He received 1 lap of racing, which he was able to utilize perfectly. And 2022 was truly a dominant season for Verstappen, as he managed to clinch the championship in Suzuka after having a troublesome start to the 2022 campaign. At this point, not many drivers can compete with Verstappen, and the talent he's showcasing out there is something that is witnessed once in a lifetime. So, what do you think about the Dutchman? Let us know in the comments below.